Hello and welcome to the Knowing Show. I am your host, Christine Marie. I am once again sitting in my car. My parents have been in town visiting. It's been an interesting couple of days because what initially catalyzed me seeing my parents and being with them over the last couple of days was actually my dad's physical health, and it's felt a little bit like a wake-up call over the last couple of days around how he's doing and his, I guess you could say, his physical well-being. And frankly, that inspired the conversation for tonight. They're in the hotel now just napping, and well, I guess not napping, they're going to bed. But I wanted to hop on here tonight and talk about this conversation, which is effectively how to know when our bodies feel off, why our bodies feel off, and how we can do a better job of tuning in and listening to our bodies. And as I've been thinking about this conversation this evening, watching my dad, watching him struggle with various health things over the last couple of days, but also, frankly, just kind of watching how he's engaged with his years, and then also frankly, how a lot of us are existing in relationship to our bodies. We're sitting and we are living such sedentary lifestyles. I'm working behind a computer most days, sitting most days. And also, not just that, but how I was raised to engage with my physical body. I didn't have a very healthy relationship with my body. And so today, as I'm thinking about what does it look like, feel like to be healthy, I haven't really known. It's kind of been an uncharted territory for me to come to experience and know my body for how I actually am feeling versus just kind of living on autopilot or living on default mode. And so for this conversation tonight of why does my body feel off and how to actually start to listen to our bodies, for me, I really want to go back to some of the core, I guess we could say, some of the core teachings that we were taught around our bodies from when we were kids. And each one of us was taught something very, very differently about how to engage with our body. And it's so important that we go back to the genesis. This, like everything else, is the question of follow the yellow brick road down to moments in our childhood where we were taught how to think about our physical body, taught how to think about like literally, and I really mean physical body, because men and women both have a lot of narratives wrapped up in how they were taught to view themselves. And for women and men, there's actually been a lot of shame, even though they're very different kinds of shame. But I've talked to men who, I've hosted men's retreats, I've hosted all women's retreats, and there's been a consistent shame around the physical body that both men and women have experienced. And so I'm not sure if, frankly, in the chat, normally we'll get pretty active and talk a lot here in the chat. And so I just am curious if people will feel comfortable sharing tonight some of the things and narratives that they were told about what to believe about themselves. And maybe tonight's going to be somewhat more quiet because this is a topic that's really challenging. This is a topic that there's a lot of embarrassment and shame around. And when we feel shame, we don't want to talk about it. And so, Emily, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for joining. Rem, y'all, this conversation tonight, I would love for it to be kind of an open floor. I'd love for us to be brave and experience just community around this conversation around our bodies. And when I'm talking about our bodies, I'm not talking about the sexualization of it. I'm talking about the health of it. And because there has been so much sexualization and even romanticism around our bodies, that I think that has deterred us from being able to talk honestly about our physical health. And we get healthy for some reason that's kind of very sexual, rather than, no, I want to actually be healthy and strong and able to engage with the world and experience the world to the fullest that I possibly can. Just this morning, I was in Sedona with my parents and I was watching my dad. Man, I didn't even realize the emotions I felt around this until I started going here. So I'm standing there with my dad, and we're standing at like the bottom of this beautiful red rock canyon. And he's wanted to go here for 30 years. But because he hasn't really been taking care of his physical body. He's standing at the bottom of this like beautiful canyon, wanting to go up it, and like I just see like a little boy in him. His eyes are big, and he's looking at this canyon, and he physically cannot walk up this mountain because he hasn't been taking care of his body to the way that he's needed to prepare him for this moment. And there was something rather devastating about watching him, this wonderful man that I love and respect and admire so much, that now I feel like I'm at the point where I want to give him the world. Like, he gave me the world in so many ways, and now I want to give him the world. And so much of his ability to engage with life right now is 100% his choice on how he chooses to be healthy or not. And I can't control any of that. I can't make any of those choices for him around the decisions of working out and eating certain ways. And he's healthy for the most part, but it's just because he's sitting so much doing all these sales proposals and driving between job sites and working so hard, but not prioritizing the health that is necessary for him to then be able to maintain strength, literally strengthen his legs, and so then if you trip or anything, you don't have the strength in the muscles and in the bones to be able to recover quickly. And so because he's been working so faithfully and pursuing such excellence with his work, his physical health has taken a toll for that. And now we're in Sedona, his dream place. He's 65, not old. He's standing at the bottom of these red rocks, and he like had to hold my mom's hand and like kind of limp up to get to the overlook. And y'all, I think that we need to be spending more time talking about this. Why does my body feel off? Why do I not feel healthy? Why do I not feel strong? What am I eating? What am I nourishing my body with? What's the quality of the water that I'm drinking? Am I actually getting enough steps in the day? Am I actually moving to the point where my body is maintaining strength and dexterity so that I don't get hurt? And not just so that I don't get hurt. The goal isn't that we do these things to maintain a neutral baseline of, I just don't want to get hurt in life. But man, it's to enjoy it and engage with life with a fervor and a passion and an ability to live a visceral life. So much of the Knowing Show is about how to turn on our intelligences and activate our full body, our mind, our emotions, and then now our physical body, so that we can enjoy the fullness of life. So I just want to take a quick moment and hop into the chat. OCD said, so sad, my dad got weak. Too. Our pillar of strength as children ends up withering away. It's so true. And that doesn't have to be the case. That doesn't have to be the end of the story, And so, C. Martin Love, hi, I'm so glad you joined earlier today, by the way. It was so good to see you. Learning to feel your body involves deep interoception, the sense that allows you to understand internal signals like hunger, heart rate, and emotions. I love that. I actually have not looked into interoception, so I need to study that. But effectively, you're saying it's the sense that allows you to understand the internal signals like hunger, heart rate, and emotions. Y'all, that's so good. Do we even have a thumb on the pulse of, am I even hungry? What's my heart rate? And really knowing not just our emotions, but literally physical signals of, I need to take care of myself. Am I tired? It was really interesting today watching my dad struggle physically. I actually started to react emotionally. I started to get angry, and I felt this anger rise in me. And in that moment, I was like, okay, I need to take a step back, because I can't force him to go get an MRI. I love him. And so there's love, yes, motivating my emotion towards him, but there's also a lot of fear. I'm afraid that at any point he could fall and break something, or, get into a pretty bad situation. And so that was really important for me to recognize, okay, there's love here, yes, but there's also a lot of fear here. And in that moment, another thing that I realized, that my emotions were actually heightened because physically it was like 1 o'clock at that point, and I actually hadn't eaten yet that day. I was fasting this morning. And so I guess you could say it was easier for me to get upset on an emotional level, because physically I was also depleted of nourishment. And so there's such an integration, I guess you can say, of our physical well-being, our emotional well-being, intellectual well-being, it's all tied. It's all connected. There's a book called The Body Keeps a Score, and we talk about how our body physically remembers trauma, but our body also physically remembers moments in time when we have engaged with food in a healthy way and when we haven't. And the narratives that we tell ourselves around food, around movement, all of those things that are necessary for us to be well, if we've got a narrative around it where we have been, frankly, one of those things, let me give an example, is I'm working out to look a certain way so that other people will perceive me a certain way. That's a very common narrative for so many of us, and it's falling into this trap of pursuing our own well-being for the purpose of others, for the gain of others' affirmation, rather than I want to feel good for my own sake so that I can be a good parent, so that I can be my best self, so that I can fulfill on my mission. Once we start doing things for ourselves so that, yes, we can love others better, the goal isn't just selfish gain. The goal is to serve. The goal is to love. Yet before we can get to that point, we actually need to make sure that we actually have purity of desire. Is it really rooted in love that I'm doing this? Or is it rooted in fear? And then the habits that stem from either love or fear are really, man, they have the power to stimulate so much well-being in us, or also stimulate so much. There's, this lesson from A Course in Miracles. I think it was lesson 16 or lesson 17. It says, we have no neutral thoughts. We also have no neutral actions, because every action is a response to thoughts. So if our thoughts are predicated in fear about what other people are going to think about us or how we're going to be perceived, then our actions are therefore going to be effectively corrupted. And we're not going to have the purity of intent and thus purity of action. And so the more we're actually able to get to the root of why we're doing something to begin with, it's then so, so helpful for us to be able to then have purity of action. And so let me go back to the chat here with Christopher. Christopher Adams, good to see you. I have had a habit of stress eating when I was a kid. It's something that I've always been ashamed of, but I also would have rather felt anything but the pain I have in my heart from so much in life. Wow. I thank you so much for sharing this. This is so incredibly honest. Someone shared a couple nights ago, Dustin Reichman came on the Knowing Show. I guess it was last week. And he shared how he would be eating as a child. And if he ate too much or ate too little, he would literally get whipped by his dad, who was suffering from alcoholism. And so because of that time in his life, he really learned an unhealthy relationship with food. And so it's so interesting, because those moments in childhood really do shape and form our engagement in the way that we show up literally at the dinner table today, or the way we show up in the gym, and the thoughts that we have that are so deeply subconscious. But to your point, I would have rather felt anything but the pain that's in your heart. You know what I mean? And so there's something around actually the form of self-punishment, or the form of self-flagellation, or some other different distraction from the inner pain, whether it's grief or maybe it's shame in a different regard that manifests through an unhealthy relationship with food. Thank you for sharing that. I think that at first, it's so vulnerable of you to share that, Christopher, and I just so respect you for doing that. And I just really, really honor that. I think that that's exactly why we need to be having these conversations. I have always found, I have 3 sisters, and then I've got now 2 sister-in-laws. So I have 5 other women in my life that I'm very close to, and then my mom, and then my niece. And then my niece, she's 11 now. When she was 4 years old, I walked into the bathroom at my sister's house while my niece was getting ready, and she was brushing her hair, and she's got this long, beautiful hair when she was a little girl. And she's brushing her hair, and she's 4, and she puts down her brush, and she looks in the mirror and she says, I'm having such a bad hair day. And it made me realize how even these littlest ones are listening to us and watching us, and they're learning how to think about their physical body by way of our example. And so it's really, really important that we do go back to childhood and analyze what was modeled for us about how to engage with our physical body. What was modeled for us about the narratives that we have about it to begin with? Not just how was our body treated in terms of how our parents treated their own body, but also how did our parents talk about their bodies? How did they talk about our bodies? So what was modeled for us, and then what was the treatment we received? And in that kind of like lateral engagement of them engaging with their body, but then also them passing it down to us, guys, we've inherited so much. So then this question of who do I want to be extends also to how do I want to engage with my body? What does health look like for me? What does physical health look like and sound like for me? What does it look like to be free when I eat? And one of the things, I was in Italy for a couple of months last year, and I was really practicing being conscious, awake while eating. And it's one of those things, at first blush, it's like, why does that matter? Y'all, we eat. So much of our life is spent eating. So much of our life is spent sleeping. Nearly 50% of our entire lifespan is dedicated to our physical body, sleeping, eating, pooping, peeing, and working out or some kind of movement. So if we're not consciously aware of the type of body that we want to have, the type of health that we even define as health, man, that's 50% of our life. And so if we want to live and fulfill on this great and grandiose mission that we feel called to, if we want to be great, we have to take our body into consideration. What does health actually mean? I was doing a knowing intensive with an executive a couple weeks ago, and in knowing intensives, knowing retreats, there's all these different types of experiences that I'll offer for different either executives or leaders or just people who want to get healthy. And so I was sitting with this executive, and we were going back over his life and looking at, when were you most healthy, emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally? And he found different moments in his life, and what he found was that when he physically he also looked the best. When he felt best relationally and emotionally in his life, he also physically, that was matched. So our physical health so often is a manifestation of the state of our inner life. Our emotional health, our intellect, our mental health, how is that showing up in the way that we're physically engaging with the world? It's really, really interesting, because when we physically are literally ill, like physically sick. A friend of mine, he's been suffering from really bad different types of metal poisoning in his body. And when he is in an environment with people who have been toxic for him or really painful for him in the past, he gets physically more sick. He gets really bad headaches, and the mercury manifests even more than when he's not around these people. And so it's really fascinating, y'all, when we start paying attention to how our body is connected to our emotions, to our mind. We realize that if we want to be to the tip-top peak performance intellectually, we can't neglect our emotions. And if we want to be emotionally healthy, we can't neglect our physical body, because our physical body is going to be a reflection. It's going to be a mirror for us. Y'all, when I get stressed, I get it from my dad, and it's not cute. I actually burp. Like my whole digestion system gets all out of whack when I'm stressed. So the second I burp, I'm like, oh, I'm not at peace. And that's my signal. Our physical body gives us warning signs and signals that something's not right. The question is, are we listening? So this whole question of something feels off, something feels wrong, what then happens? What's the next step? How do we engage with our physical body? Do we show it respect? Do we show it that we honor our body? Are we actually taking the time to tend to this vessel that's the vehicle for this life that we are living? And if we say we value life, are we actually valuing and honoring our bodies? So I'd love to even just hop into the chat now and hear from you guys. I'd love to hear from you all around, what does health mean to you? Because I got to tell you, it was probably last spring when I realized that my entire definition of health had been informed by society. I had never really taken my own definition of health into my own hands. I had never created my own definition. And so because of that, when I wanted to be in the best shape of my life, or I wanted to get healthy, I didn't even know what that meant. because I'd never taken time to define it for myself. And so I'd love to hear from y'all. What does that even mean to you? What does health mean to you? I'm just going to jump in the chat here. Just jumping in. Hello. Oh, Melina, I'm so glad to see you. She says, I know I'm guilty of not paying attention or tuning into my body. Same. Honestly, I think that that's one of the biggest and most important things is actually tuning in and paying attention and listening. It's listening to our emotions and listening to our bodies and seeing how am I doing? Okay, I'm just looking through here. Just jumping in. Peter, hello from Sweden. I'm so glad you're here. I'm just curious. Okay. Fire Boltaz. I just exercise 3 days a week. It's not rocket science, and I eat whatever food my wife cooks for me, which is homemade. I love that. Honestly, I love the rhythm. Exercising 3 days a week. I've found that even if I'm just working out, honestly, if I'm just doing some kind of movement every day, I got my Fitbit again a couple weeks ago, and I'm just counting my steps, and it's like, oh, let me get up and move. And it actually has been buzzing to remind me like to get up every 30 minutes, I think is the setting. And that's been really, really helpful because really it's been interesting to see how much I'm really sedentary in my entire life. Joe Ingram. Isn't this coat the best? Oh my gosh. Shagaboo. Absolutely nothing matters to you if you don't have your health. Y'all, it's so true. I've gone probably the room that I've been in that has had the most successful people, and I put success in air quotes because most of them would say success is having a lot of money. So I go into this room, there's a lot of successful people, and the things that they talk about is not how to earn more money, it's how to be healthy. These are people who have made it, right? The people who, and I put made it in air quotes, because now once they've got all the money in their bank, they realize how they don't have their health to match it. And y'all, how do we make sure that we don't end up in our life where finally we have all the money and we don't have the body to enjoy it? We don't have the health to enjoy it. And so this question of, why does my body feel off? Am I even honoring it in the first place? My mom did this exercise because the way we were raised was to look at our body with, frankly, a lot of shame. I grew up in a really Christian conservative environment where our bodies were to just be kind of covered up and ignored. And it was like something that wasn't good. Like I just had a very negative view of just my physical body. I didn't view it as something to be honored and something to be tended to and a temple of God. Because if I really believe that God is in, it was a Course in Miracles the other day, and it says, God is in my mind. Man, if God is in my mind, then what else am I filling my mind with? Because I want to keep that sacred and pure. If God's in my heart, in my mind, I want to keep it an honorable place. And so if I believe that I am made in the image of God, then why don't I actually take the time to think about my body and take care of it? And my mom is in this school right now where she's kind of learning some new ways of thinking. And I'm so proud of her. I'm so proud of her. She's 59 years old and really willing to effectively reprogram some of these old ways of thinking that have just been really damaging. And she looked in the mirror. She said that they had her look in the mirror for, I think she had to set her alarm for like 5 minutes or something. And she just had to look at herself in the eyes and like look at her face and her hair. And she told me that she just sat there and cried for like 20 minutes because she said, I never have looked at myself. And this is the most precious woman. She had 6 kids and she gave everything to everybody else. And now at 59 years old, she's learning how to love herself. And it's loving herself for the purpose of service and love for other people, because we really can't give from an empty cup. We really can't give from a place of depletion. And the thing is does she believe she's worthy to begin with of being known and loved, even if there was no one else that she could help ever again? Is she herself? Are you yourself worthy of love? And if we actually believe that, then that might mean that we probably could tend to ourselves a little bit better and love on ourselves a little bit more. And in that process of, she realized that she had green in her eyes, and she never knew that before because she always felt so much shame over her body. And so again, it's really taking this whole concept of sexualization and romanticism out of relationship with our body and actually looking at it as a vehicle and a vessel and a temple of God, where you and I get to exist. When you cut someone open and do heart surgery, you don't find them. We are not our body, but it's also this thing that we get to steward. That's the house and home of our mind and spirit and emotions. And in this place we exist. And what a blessing that is. What a blessing to have, minds that work, and for some of us, eyes that blink, and some of us, hands that move. Others of us don't get to do that. We've had some folks on here before where, they can't walk, or they are, from the neck down, they can't move. We're so immeasurably blessed to have eyesight, to be able to speak, to be able to listen and hear and see this beautiful world that we live in. And for those of us who can't see, to be able to hear. For those of us who can't hear, be able to speak. For those of us who can't speak, be able to walk. It's just, there's so many aspects of our physical body that we have something to be grateful for. But if we don't take the time to truly take responsibility and be a steward of our physical body, we're missing out on this piece that is such an important puzzle to the whole. If we want to live great, if we want to live lives on a mission, doing something that is beautiful and why we're here to begin with. And so if we want to actually live a bold and courageous life, if we want to go into the arena like Theodore Roosevelt talks about in his speech from 1912, if we want to live a life where we're really, truly doing something exquisite, then it is required of us to consider the vessel that we're doing it with. I have this little fruit fly in the car with me. That's always fun. I'm just going to jump here in the chat. All right, I'm just checking in here. I love that. Chagaboo, I thank God for my health, and I'm grateful to him for it. I love that. Money, relationships, possessions, none of that matters if you're sick. We take it for granted completely. Oh, Davey, hello from Scotland. I'm so glad you're here. Benjamin, supplements only work if you take them. Organize, make a meal plan, keep it up. Results happen after months of consistency. I'm glad that you talked about supplements. When we're talking about it, the nuance of actually how to be healthy and what does that look like, working out on a rate. And in working out, I think that all is dependent on what kind of our definition is. I want to live a life that's more so oriented outside, taking calls on while I'm walking rather than on the phone. I actually bought one of my employees a walking desk so that she could, have a meeting but be able to walk. And I want to take meetings where I can walk outside and actually just take a break and do 10 push-ups and just literally be moving. And again, living life outside. I was talking to my best friend, and we were talking about how we don't want our lives so focused on food. Instead of having people over to eat a meal with us, let's go on a walk with people. Let's actually just incorporate movement into our lives. And so I'm still early on in my journey of how to do this, but one of the most important ways that before I could even think about what do I want my body to look like, feel like, I had to understand where had I mishonored my body, or dishonored it rather. And I had really dishonored my body in romantic relationships. I was married, and I didn't honor my body. And it wasn't anything to do with my husband at the time. Not at all. It had everything to do with me. I never took the time to listen to my body and realize when I did feel respected, when I didn't feel respected. I didn't honor my body with food. I would eat too much and I wasn't stopping when I was full. I would dishonor my body by honestly not working out consistently and tending to it. I didn't honor my body when I ran my marathon, and my back gave way at mile 16 and I kept running. So there's just different points where we haven't honored our bodies. And until we take ownership for it, recognize the unhealthy thought patterns around it, can we then begin reparation? and begin effectively creating a new relationship with our bodies, begin to heal what has been damaging. I really believe that our bodies, we have a lot over it more so than we realize. We have control to love on our bodies and heal our parts of our bodies that maybe we haven't realized. And I'm still kind of learning how to do this, but I just know last year I had a really bad headache at Christmas. And instead of just taking medicine for it, I actually sat with the headache and I focused on my headache and I closed my eyes and I breathed into the pain that I felt in my head. And as I breathed out, I actually felt my headache kind of dissolve and it went away. But so often it's pop a pill and make yourself feel better rather than, oh, I wonder if I can actually take time to listen to what my body might be trying to tell me. Is something wrong? Is my body feeling off because there's actually something that's not right? And this is how my gut is getting my attention. So there's just so much more nuance when it comes to our body than the sexualization that culture has made it out to be. There's so much more about our body than just popping a medication or popping a pill to make get instant gratification. So if we're willing to do the work, if we're willing to sit with it, if we're willing to listen and not just maybe even plug it into ChatGPT, but really be curious and listen to what our body has to tell us, the body keeps the score. It does in so many ways of past trauma, of past narratives, of how effectively we've been able to tell us how we're supposed to feel, what we're supposed to like. And if we were to take radical responsibility and ownership over our own bodies, treating it as something that we are to steward, what would happen? How would we show up? What kind of confidence would we have? How would we maybe roll our shoulders back? And how would we maybe literally physically feel if we were to start taking radical ownership of this body and this vessel that is ours? Just jumping back into the chat. Shagaboo, I love this. Seeing a baby, smelling a flower, drinking water when you're thirsty, learning something new. These are the small things we take for granted. All good things come from above. I would not lie to you. I love this. It's so true. Being so present allows for that. I'm so glad that you brought that up because honestly, y'all, there's so much beauty. There's so much goodness. And if we're rushing through life and we're not actually being in our physical body, and I mean actually being in our physical body, when's the last time you actually looked at your hands? When's looking at the lines and even the wrinkles on our faces? I'm getting wrinkles here because I'm 32 years old and I'm just getting older, and all the lines and wrinkles and imperfections that we're constantly trying to cover up and hide, maybe they actually tell a story. Maybe they're part of our experience. Maybe they're a part of what makes you and me unique, rather than trying to look and sound like everybody else. Maybe this is a part of our story, and our story would not be so impactful if it sounded just like the person next door. So if we were to really own our experience and own our story, I think that requires us to own our physical body too. Because if we're not taking our physical body into the intelligence of the system that we have going on inside of us and understand how that is an integral part of the picture, we really are silencing a part of our intelligences, a part of our data points, part of access to what our bodies know. Just looking here in the chat. Polex, thank you. Thank you for joining. Y'all, I am going to hop off now. Thank you all so much for joining. I'm going to be live again tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern to move through A Course in Miracles, lesson 33 on February 3rd. So I'm excited to see you all tomorrow. I'm going to hop over to the Foundation First podcast, or it's not a podcast, but I'm going to go live over there, Foundation First Marketing. That's where I talk all things branding, business, marketing. So if you want to come join me, I would love to have you. I'll drop the link here in the chat, but it's very different than this episode and this show. It's all business. So come on over and join me if you'd like. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining me. Y'all, our physical bodies, there's so much here. There's so much here for me that I'm still really working on learning. And I think for the most part, we have to recognize where we've come from. What are the narratives that were told to us about our physical body? What was modeled for us? How are we taught to engage with our physical bodies? And what does healing actually look like? When have you felt most healthy and most strong? What were you doing? What were you thinking about your body? How did you look at your body compared to other people? And what does it look like for you to move into health today so that, again, why are we doing this? So that we can be the greatest and most beautiful and potent version of ourselves, because each one of us is here for a reason. Each one of us has a call over our lives. Each one of us has a mission and people for us to love on. So with that, thank you so much for joining. Shagaboo, thank you for sharing so much tonight. It was so good to hear from you. I will see you either over at Foundation First Marketing here in a few minutes when I go live, or I'll see you tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. And I also will be going live again tomorrow night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. So with that, thank you all so much for joining me, and I'll see you soon.